Schwer,
Here.
Councilmember Wong,
Here.
Councilmember Nordby,
Here.
Mayor Monge.
Here. One second.
Did someone motion?
Yes.
Oh, second.
No, I didn't hear motion as well.
Aye.
No, we can't start off like this.
It's been
Do we accept the agenda?
So moved, Your Honor.
We'll move Councilmember Wong,
Second.
second Councilmember Norby. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I apologize, I'm just getting my packet download. My computer did a reboot. Topics 2024 budget. I think that's you. Oh, I should probably announce you. Dan.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Yes, tonight is the official kickoff of our 2024 budget process. And in tonight, we're going to have a levy setting workshop. We need direction from you. So Brian and myself, our goal is to get you as well informed on the budget as possible. So we're going to, tonight, I'm gonna kind of walk you through where we're at right now with the 2023 budget, what we've accomplished in the last couple of years, and then kind of talk about what are some of the driving factors heading into the 2024 budget preparation. And then we will have some activities. Councilmember Cole knows that I actually take the workshop seriously. Since it's a workshop, I'm gonna put you to work. No, the real reason is to find out some information from you so we can supply better documentation as we go through the budget process. I think you're all aware by September 30th, we need to certify our maximum levy to the county. We usually do that in about the first meeting in September. So, and the levy portion of our budget includes the general operations of the city, the debt levy, they're combined as far as known as the city's levy, and then there's the HRA levy and the EDA levy. Those have to be certified as a maximum by the end of September. Our internal service funds, our enterprise funds, and so forth, those budgets can continue in the year, and everything gets ultimately approved in December. So with that, I'm just gonna kind of walk you through where we're at. And the purpose of tonight is to provide an opportunity for the city council to discuss and set the 2024 levy target. The items for consideration is the starting point, our 2023 budget and city-based property tax levy. The driving factors for 2024 are preliminary evaluation changes, the HRA and EDA property tax levy, and then a budget calendar. So the starting point of 2023, this is kind of where we're at right now, and these are the general fund highlights. Our revenues are comprised of property taxes comprise 56% of our revenues that we get in the general fund. Intergovernmental is 18%. That's primarily made up of the local government aid. And then there's other financing sources or transfers, 9%, which are coming from our enterprise funds and our HRA and EDA. Expenditures, the composition by categories is our personnel and benefits comprise 63% of our general fund budget, professional services 28%, and supplies 5%. Expenditures by department, our police makes up 42%, our fire and code enforcement make up 14%, our street maintenance makes up 14%. And as you can see, in 2023, our levy in the general fund was increased approximately 12.6%, and in the past 14 years, we've averaged 5.8% levy increase. As you can see by this, that our biggest components are our staff. We have a heavy reliance on property taxes, and we have a heavy reliance on other intergovernmental funding sources. Property taxes and intergovernmental funding sources amount to 74% of our revenue streams, where you see our personnel and benefits represent 63%. Our public safety, which is a combination of our police and fire and code enforcement, alone is 56% of our general fund. This will kind of show you, just in a graphic form, those same revenues by categories. Again, the biggest piece of that pie is the ad valorem taxes or property taxes. So the biggest burden on the revenue side goes to our residents. Again, expenditures by category on a graph form shows the biggest piece of the pie is our personnel costs. And by departments, you can see police is by far the biggest piece of the pie, followed by fire and code enforcement, and then by street maintenance. You can see that the rest of the departments that are in the general fund in total are pale in comparison to those three in total composition. You're looking at about 70% of it is either in street, fire and code enforcement, or police. This is my third budget. I don't want to be known as the finance director that keeps increasing the levy all the way through. But this is what has happened in the increase from 2021 to 2023. As you can see, the city has done an excellent job. The credit goes to the city council. They have thrown a lot of funds towards the police department. In those 2 years, the police department from 2021 to 2023 has gone up approximately $726,000. You see, followed by building inspections. That's part of when you look at building inspections. It's the permitting part to it. It's also offset by revenue. So that's kind of a little misleading kind of component to it. If we reduce our expenditures and the building inspections, we also have to reduce our revenue streams. So for the majority, right now how the contract reads, for the majority of permitting, we retain about 90% of the total cost as a revenue stream. The rest of it's an expenditure. If it's an electrical inspection, we retain 20% and 80% goes to the vendor that we utilize. You can see that building inspection, or fire has gone up approximately $165,000, street maintenance $205,000. The biggest reason why these increases was last year when we went through the budget and the kickoff, there were two primary areas of concentration that the city council spoke of. One was staffing. When the city went from the year 2020 to 2021, there were 4 staff reductions at that point to get to a 0% levy. The city decided to do that 0% levy from 2020 to 2021, primarily because of COVID. So they took the residents in consideration, and they said, hey, we don't know what this is going to be like. And obviously, when we start the budget in June and we have to have the general fund done by September, we don't know what that impact is. And if everybody remembers, shelter in place was imposed, I think, in March of 2020. So so in the past 2 years, the city has invested quite a bit in staffing. And I think we've done an excellent job. What I'm saying is that I think we need to live with that staffing level for a while. I think we need to see what those results are and how it moves the needle as far as our services that we're providing. The other part of those two components that were given to us as main focuses was infrastructure. If you remember last year, that part of the option of increasing the general fund to 12.6 was also to eliminate our HRA levy, which then had an overall impact of about approximately 8.5% to the residents. Part of the reason of maintaining a higher general fund rate that goes on to the property taxes itself is because the city of North St. Paul ranks number 17 amongst all of the cities as a fiscal disparities recipient. In other words, we're considered a winner. So how the fiscal disparities pool works is that it was adopted in 1971. It took your commercial value of your property at that point in time. It's administered through the metro area. Part of the principle behind it is that no local jurisdiction has a say on where a highway or a roadway is going to go, which could spur on some commercial development. So there should be some sort of sharing amongst all of the participants, all of the cities that are there. Because we have a very low commercial base, that our fiscal contribution is very small, the distribution is very high. When the distribution comes in, it's a market value, and then it's multiplied by the prior year's tax rate, and that generates into real dollars. So last year, we got approximately $1.2 million from fiscal disparities. So whatever we levy gets reduced by that 1.2 as it's passed on to the property tax payers, the residents of the city of North St. Paul. So that's a big factor that we need to realize. If we don't keep up our rate with the increasing, and the bigger factor is with the increasing of market values, our rate will go down, and then it can have an impact. It's one of the potential impacts that it could have on lowering the amount of fiscal disparity dollars that we'll get in the subsequent year, which then means if you hold everything else constant, that will actually have a higher impact on our taxpayers when they get their tax bills. So that's a consideration that we've worked on the past 2 years, and I think we've done a very good job as far as that. The numbers aren't in yet. Fiscal disparity numbers don't become final until August. We haven't seen even the preliminary net tax capacity numbers from the county yet, but hopefully by July we'll start to get that and we'll start to see where we're at. But we do have preliminary values, which I'll share with you in a little bit. Yes, Mayor.
Question on that one statement you just said before. So it's like if you don't spend, then you're going to be even maybe more because you're not going to get as much back from the government, from the state.
Yeah.
So there could be a holding us accountable as far as fiscally, but that means less from what's coming back.
Right. It doesn't come from the state. It comes from all of the cities,
Yeah,
contribute
sorry.
a portion of, above their base.
Yeah.
Into this pool. So what ends up happening is that in the subsequent year, if your rates have dropped, that's one of the factors. Also, the other part of the factor is the growth in commercial and the market values that are adjusted in there. But holding everything else constant, that if we were to, our rate were to drop very low, and we got the same distribution value, in other words, the same type of growth across the metro area as far as the commercial and industrial properties, then because our rate dropped, we would end up getting a lower value that ends up reducing our levy, which ends up getting passed on to the taxpayer. So yes, they do end up with an impact because of that. The number one recipient of fiscal disparities is the city of St. Paul. And we rank the 17th out of there, so we're in the top 20 and is considered a winner. So that's a part of our equation as we go through things, and we'll get into more detail further down in our budget discussions. That won't happen tonight, but I just want to make everybody aware because in the past 2 years, we've been very conscientious about that fact. In the first year that I was here, we actually went out and refunded some debt that was on a market value basis and moved it over to tax capacity. That ended up helping us raise our rate without having an impact on the increasing of the levy at all. It actually reduced the levy, but it also further reduced the impact it would have on our residents of the city of North St. Paul. just kind of a comparison, you know, I had just mentioned that, you know, the city in the past 2 years has really put a lot of money towards public safety. I can't answer what's enough and what's not enough, but wanted to do kind of a comparison to see how we're doing public safety compared to other cities in the state of Minnesota that are roughly our size. And you can see a lot of highlights that are there. In each one of the columns, the highlighted are the top 5. So in population, you can see that we're not one of the top 5. In general fund budget, we're not one of the top 5. But as far as a police budget and a fire budget, the 2 components that make up our total public safety and our total public safety, we are in the top 5 in cities that are comparable to our size. When you compare the public safety total budget to the general fund budget as a percentage, there's where that 56% that I showed in the other graph, we are the highest. So kind of looking at some of the components to that, you know, I look at, we have both in-house police and fire. Some cities, even in Ramsey County, that are our size, have done a little different, you know, makeup. As you can see, the city of Vadnais Heights, that has a population a little bit higher than ours, they contract out their police force. They don't have, you know, their own police department. If you look at the city of Mounds View, Mounds View has their own police department, yet their fire department is through a joint powers agreement that is shared between Blaine, Spring Lake Park, and Mounds View. I think those are only the 3 entities that are a part of that. And then you can look at Little Canada that has a contracted police, and you see their fire is significantly less than ours. I'm bringing this to your attention not to say that that's what we should be doing. It's food for thought. Today's kind of we're gonna have some activities where we're gonna brainstorm. I'm showing you we got a heavy reliance on property taxes. We got a heavy reliance on the intergovernmental. You know, we're making over 70% of our revenue. What choices do we have in generating revenue? The other side of the equation is reducing expenditures. Some of that, at some point in time, are going to become some very difficult decisions to make. They're not my decisions, they're your decisions. And that's part of the theme that Brian and I are trying to pass, and message that we're trying to give through this budget, is that we want to put you in a position to make sure that you're as well informed of everything, that you can make the best decision for the city as possible, and I know you will. And so that's really what this slide is, because I was kind of curious to how some of the other cities were as a makeup, and were they all facing that higher percentage in public safety as we were. Yes.
If you go back to that other slide, the slide we were just on,
Yep. Yes, sir.
do any of those townships or cities, do they have their own additional sales tax, and would that be included in this?
That's a very good question. I can't answer that, but definitely we'll look at that, and absolutely, no, you're pinning a point where their sales tax could be a revenue source. So I see. This is what I love about this kickoff. The rest of it kind of gets tougher, but this kickoff, because we start to ask, and any comments that you make, then it gives me food for thought and things that we need to research. So we can look at seeing and putting some information together for you for cities that are comparable to our size, that do have a sales tax. And we can bring that information back to you. So very good question, thank you.
Would you agree that if a city on here does have a sales tax, it could possibly skew these results?
No,
Okay.
because their general fund budget would be their general fund. It's just that their reliance on property taxes and other revenue sources would be a less percentage than it is for ours.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question or a request. As you go through looking for comparable cities, do you mind also looking at like regional, the ones closest to us as well, even though they're not the same size? I'm just thinking in terms of sales tax, for example, where a small community, probably more people spend money here than, other places, and most people would come here for different services as well, more than our population.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Absolutely. The next slide shows you our levy, and it kind of shows you it from 2009 all the way to the current of 2023. And you can see for a number of years from 2010 to 2014, 2015, it was relatively flat. You can see it's been a steep incline. It was, again, flat for the 20 to 2021. That was when the city made the decision to do a 0% levy. And then there's been a significantly and a sharp increase in 2022 and 2023. Overall, when you take an average of all those years, it comes up to approximately about a 5.8% average annual levy increase. Again, the levy is made up of two components. One's debt, and the other one is just for the general operations of the city. Some of the driving factors for this upcoming budget in 2024, based upon our current staffing levels and the union contracts, that our total personnel costs in the general fund, because we're focusing on just general fund, not all the rest of the enterprises at this point in time, has gone up approximately $322,000 or 4.9% levy increase. Existing personnel benefits went up to $223,000 or a 3.4% levy increase. We have already made the transition from a contracted communications coordinator to a city staff. That had an increase in our personnel costs of approximately $77,000, but we have a reduction in our contractual services of $62,000. So that delta of about $14,000 is about a 0.2% levy increase. And then there's been a switch back now to 2 part-time community service officers in the police department, replacing the 1 full-time, and that's an increase of approximately $22,000 or 0.3 levy increase. Our debt levy increase this year has increased approximately $76,000, and that's because we're for the first time having to, well, we've actually, this is the 3rd year, this is the first year we actually have to levy for it. It's the debt that was issued for all of the work over around the Centennial area for the roads and such. And that's a 1.2% levy increase. Good news that local government aid in this last legislative session, we will receive $84,000 more, so that'll decrease our levy 1.3%. Unfortunately, it quickly gets offset by Metro INET. Metro INET's total charges are increasing approximately $52,500. This is the 2nd consecutive year that we've seen some really big increases in Metro INET. We will be having meetings coming up in the next few weeks with Metro INET. They've been very open, and so we'll have that discussion. Probably the biggest driver, and Brian, jump in if I misquote this at this point in time, one of the mechanisms in which they use to charge, or they use as a measurement to come up with their rates, and they charge their customers, is the number of users on the system. In other words, if you have an email address, you're a user. The city made a big change this past year in trying to get all of our commission members emails. So that was one of the bigger driving factors. And in addition, well, of course, their costs went up. In addition, they lost a couple of cities that are part of the JPA for the Metro INET. So with that combination, we're seeing a bigger share. If we would not have had that increase to our commission members on emails, it would not have been as high as this, but still we would have seen another increase onto that.
At 51, what % is that of an increase?
It's a 0.8% levy increase.
Oh, sorry, down there. I didn't see it.
Yes.
Blocking it.
Dan, point of clarity, what are you using for a levy point? 60,000, 65,000?
70, about
70?
70, yeah, that's where we're at.
I tried to do the math in her head, so I thought I'd ask it easier. Thank you.
And then CIP and infrastructure are going to be some big driving force. Yes, sir.
That wasn't quite the question. I was asked about what is the % that they're charging us? How much did that go up? Is what I was asking.
Oh, the percent that they,
Because I keep, because you said an increase
sure,
of
sure,
51,000, then
Oh,
there was a
yep.
big increase. I mean,
Yep.
what % increase have we been having? Because I'm in the technology department for my
that
real
was-
job.
that resulted in a 19% increase from our 2023.
And there was an increase that was almost that big, you think? the
I
year
think it was
before.
20% last year,
So that's 49%,
39.
39%, sorry, yeah.
Multiplied probably get you to low 41% compounded. Yeah,
All right, thank you.
yeah, significant.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you speak to the percentage of, rough percentage of how much it costs to have those emails? Just so I can kind of understand the 51,000.
I can't
Breakdown,
tonight,
okay.
but I definitely will supply that information, kind of a breakdown. That's why we've got part of a meeting with them to kind of get a better understanding of how they're coming up with their rates, their charges, and to get at that information, and that will be something that we will share back.
One
Thank you.
question. Did I, in the last raise of the 20%, wasn't that right at where we could have decided to go somewhere else? Was that this company was that one meeting I was at?
No, what
that
you were, is health insurance.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you.
with
Yep, that's
Pete.
why. I knew there was something that got bumped right away to that level, and I thought maybe that was that 20%. Thanks.
Dan, if you don't
Yes,
mind. So do you want to explain why there was a big increase last year with the INET and how they went independent from being under the city of Roseville?
Yeah, last year, up to last year, they really have been, I call it more of a quasi City of Roseville department. They've now broken away in their own entity. So every city that's a part of it had to sign on to a JPA, Joint Powers Agreement. And they hired a CIO. They're restructuring how things have been done, and there was a lot of positions, from what they've said, that were doing dual roles. Some were doing 3 different jobs, so they've hired a number, I think last year was like 9 FTEs that they ended up hiring. In addition to that, they didn't have any fund balance for replacement of equipment for their infrastructure, so they ended up coming up with a couple of different models to start to build up that fund balance, to make sure that they're an ongoing concern. They had 3 options, A, B, C. They ended up at the end of the day choosing option B, which was approximately a 20% increase. The highest end of the option was a 30% increase, and so it got reduced somewhat. But I think in our conversations, basically we were anticipating, from what they were saying, that with their increases in contracts and from their vendors, that it would have been more like about a 10% increase this year. So we were shocked to see it increase 19% after a 20% increase. And again, that's the reason why we're going to have a meeting and work through that and find out where we're at. Also, You know, it may be a time to look at, is there certain ways that we can break some of the services that are being provided by Metro INET, and contracting with somebody else for them, and trying to reduce costs. And so that's one of our options. I get to write that one up there as a brainstorming option when we get into our activities later on. But yeah, we need to look at everything. And so that is one of the options that we need.
I think there'd be a difference between an email address and a whole Microsoft suite license. So to me, that's you're adding licenses that are, people don't use except for an email.
And they are looking at, and they haven't started it, but they're looking at maybe coming up with different methodology in which they do charge their charges. And so that may be a suggestion in the future of how they go about it. Would that create a significant reduction for us? Definitely would create some reduction. I can't tell you if what we're paying is in line with what we would find from an outside vendor. Some cities have broken out parts of the services, not all. So, and from our discussions with Metro INET, they're very much open to it. They're not saying nope, it's all or nothing. So they're willing to work with us and help us get to that next point. And for us, it's all about, we got to try to be able to reduce our costs.
We're able to do that. There's no contract right now as far as that. Are we in the middle of a contract with them?
I would say there has to be probably a 1 year out after they set their budget, but I'm not 100% sure. Do you remember what the JPA says, Brian?
I don't off the top of my head, we'll have to look into that.
We'll look in that. Yep.
Thank you.
And then CIP, our infrastructure, our capital improvement plan. And we'll be getting to that in our next meeting in July. I am really happy to announce, and I left them downstairs. Can you believe that? Could you please? Yes. Yeah, there's some, yeah, if you can find them on my desk. That's no small task. I know you were going to say that.
Send out a search party.
So in our CIP, I honestly believe that the CIP is very, very important, because it really is about your planning. It's about your vision for the city in the future. When I came here, there really wasn't a comprehensive capital improvement plan. It was more just on the road reconstruction plan, which has to be done every 6 years for bonding purposes. So we've done a very good job of instituting, and it takes a lot of work from all of our department heads to put this all together. It was built in an Excel spreadsheet. Hard to read, not a lot of description, which isn't that good for you to have an understanding of what the needs in the city are. So for $1,600, we bought a new piece of software that we're using, and I just wanted to show you a couple of reports that come off of that system. And one of them is every project will have a description and justification that you'll be able to see. And again, it's part of that mission that Brian and I have for this year, is to get you as well informed as possible so you can make the best decision for the city. I'm actually excited, and our new addition to the finance department is the one who had some experience with the software that we chose to use, and I think it's very, very beneficial. And hopefully, if you want to hold off on that one for a second, that one there, but that other one there, so you can see it. It's still in a draft form. But kind of excited about that, so we can see that. But obviously, your infrastructure is a big part of your budget, because there's so much capital. That's what ties into your debt and your ability to keep moving forward. So the items that are identified up above come to about $364,000, which is a 5.6% levy increase. Kind of a summary of the debt levy. We kind of talked about that. It's increasing 75,000. Again, you can see it's from the 2020A tax increment bonds. Again, I'm trying to frame this so we're all fully aware. Last year at the Truth and Taxation meeting, we had a resident come here and had said, hey, what about our debt? And they had asked about the bonds that were issued for the city public works facility and said, oh, well, that ought to be, coming to an end soon. And the answer was yes, it will be. The final pay year will be in 2025. In this 2024 is when we stop levying for it. I didn't have the heart to say the rest of the story, and the rest of the story is, yeah, it's going away, but it's going to be replaced by other debt if we're going to be able to maintain our infrastructure. And that's where that CIP becomes so important, because that's really where City Council has to identify where the priorities are and trying to minimize the impact that it has on the residents of the city of North St. Paul. Preliminary valuations. Here's some good news finally, that the market values are continuing to increase. And the market values again are as of January 2nd of 2023 that we use for payable year 2024. It's the fourth highest total market value increase in 11 years. It's an increase across all property segments, and it's the third highest median residential market value increase in 10 years. And so as you can see, our median value home increases from $273,900 to $299,000, which represents an 8.1% increase. You can see our overall estimated market value has also increased, and that represents a 9.1% increase in market value. So again, we're seeing big market value increases. Last year, if you recall, we had about a 15.5% market value increase. This right here, this slide just kind of shows you the number of parcels that were in 22, parcels in 23, and then the change, and then the median value change. And you can see all of the segments, except for apartments, have increased. The HRA and the EDA levy, right now, the thought is proposing to keep them the same as they were in 2023, with the HRA not having a levy, and the EDA being the same amount that we levied last year of approximately $201,000. The budget calendar, as of to date, all preliminary budgets have been submitted by department heads. All department heads have met with the city manager, myself, and Mary Kay. We are working on the second part, if you want to pass that other part to it. Again, I hate to keep saying this over again, but this is our theme this year, to keep you as well informed as possible so you make the best decision. We are going to have, when our department heads come up for their presentations, they'll be doing their presentations on their budget, and they'll be doing their presentations on the CIP. And that bit of information will be their narrative about their budget with some statistical information. So they are right now in the process of filling that out and completing that, as well as we're wrapping up the CIP, and we will have a department head meeting to review all of the CIP, and Brian will make the final decision on what's on the CIP when it gets presented to you in our next budget meeting. And as you can see again, right now I'm kind of targeting September 5th for the adoption of the preliminary 2024 property tax levy. Again, when we adopt the property tax levy, it's the maximum. That means it can't go up from that point in time, but it certainly can go down. So, I mean, there can still be discussions all the way through to the time that we approve it in December. Again, we are required to have a truth and taxation hearing, and that usually is, the notifications usually go out, and you have to hold them towards the end of November, early December. We have in the past had it on the first Tuesday in December, and then I think we'll have it then, and then the following 2 weeks, we'll have the actual approval of the levy itself. So, that's the first part, and I got to do a lot of talking. And so I'm going to throw it out if there's any questions for clarification at this point before we move on to the second part of our discussion tonight.
Dan, you call out a potential of I gotta scroll to the top, 12.3% levy increase. And that's kind of with everybody's wishes and desires in, is that what it's rolling to?
We have not gotten to that point yet. That 12.6 was what we did in 2023, this year.
Okay. We were up that much?
Well, but we didn't levy anything for the HRA, so the overall total levy was 8.5%.
Okay, that's the number I remember, okay.
That's the number, yep.
And so before we put anything on top, we're already at,
About 5.5,
5.5.
5.6.
okay. And that's just to maintain?
That's just
Okay.
to maintain right now at this point in time. And there's still things that can change. These are, preliminary numbers, but yes, of what we have so far, and where the meetings with the city manager, that's where we're at right now.
Early guidance from surrounding communities?
I've had just, but I've had some preliminary conversations, and a few of them are somewhere in the target of 6-7%.
Okay.
More to come on that.
Okay.
So, all right.
When you're talking numbers, just so we're all on the same page, when we levy, we pick a certain dollar amount, and every percentage you're giving us is a change of that dollar amount from last year, correct?
Correct.
What was the dollar amount from last year?
Good question. Of the overall levy, I think it would have had to been somewhere about, I was going to say 6.9 million total debt, and I think that's where the 70,000 comes up from. I don't think so. Yes, it is. The total levy was 6.5 million. Approximately 5.2 was general operations, and 1.4 was debt. It's on page 10.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, now we need your help.
All right,
All right.
put us in, Coach.
No more levies. No more levies.
This is going to be a tough.
Yes. Ooh, cordless.
Oh, what?
We're getting fancy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can hear you now.
This is going to be a tough crowd if I'm already hearing a chant, no more levy, no more levy. I mean, this is going to be tough. But if that's what you decide, that's what you decide. Because remember, this is your budget at the end of the day. So your first activity today is council activity, a little brainstorming.
Okay. We are faced with many infrastructural needs and rising costs. What do we do to maximize our resources and minimize the overall impact to the residents of the city? So I'll start off, and, because we've already heard it, it's really to review our IT.
Is that microphone on top there? I might be catching that one. Lights off.
Fix it, Dan.
All right. Review IT. Good start.
I'm not gonna pick on anybody right away.
Review insurance.
Yes. Being the first one?
Usually I have to go after
Yeah.
Tim after a while.
Do they still make Mr. Yuck?
Mr. Yuck, yeah. When I was talking to other cities, one of the big things that they asked was about with the fire department, because we still have volunteers and everybody's been going to full-time. And I don't know where we're at with the fire department as far as budgeting and things like that. Is that something we have to be concerned about? I don't know where that fit in there. Just to understand the fire department's needs, because as I was looking down, we see some big purchases for some fire department equipment. And every town around us has gone to full-time fire departments now because they can't find volunteers. Does that make sense? So we have to see where we're at for our budget, because we're gonna spend money on, we have to understand, because we have a couple big ticket items coming up for the fire department. And
Yeah, when you look at the CIP, yes.
where we're sitting at that, because do we have to make changes like everybody else in towns, or smaller towns where we still get enough of our volunteers and everything else, so that's just something to.
Well, again, I'm not advocating one way or the other. I look at everything with two sides of the coin.
Yep,
And the way I look at it, it's with the fire and the police. We're hearing the difficulty in getting people into the public service, public safety arena. I don't dispute any of that. Tough environment. Just shows you there's some other cities that are right here in Ramsey County that have gone a different route with it. And they've contracted, and they end up contracting with Ramsey County Sheriff's Department. You could save money by contracting your police services with Ramsey County. You probably could, and our police chief didn't balk at it when I threw it in his budget hearing. You probably could save $1.5 million by doing that. Is it the same level of service? I have no idea. Is it a desire from the city? I have no idea. I'm just throwing out, thoughts and ideas and so forth. But the double-edged side to it is if we're having such a difficulty in getting and retaining police force, why do we keep having this problem if our costs are keep going up higher and higher to the point that we're hitting our residents? So it's worth a discussion. I'm not heading in a direction. I'm just saying it's worth a discussion when we're sitting at the end of the day, and in the past 2 years, we've had a 6% levy increase and a 12.6 on our general fund components to get where we're at. We see that we had $726,000 worth of an increase in expenditures in our police department. My question is, where does it end and how does it end? The preliminary ask from our police chief in this past go-around, the preliminary, which is not included in any of our numbers at this point in time, but it'll be something that you'll have a discussion, was for some additional FTEs. It came to a tune of $500,000. There's 7% levy increase right there, just for that alone. How do you keep affording that? That's the balancing act, and that's part of this activity, is how do we look at it? And to me, I look at it from the standpoint is nothing should be off the table. At the end of the day, after you have a discussion, you may not decide to do something. That's your decision.
Being the first time for me in the budget committee, meetings and things like that. I want to make sure everything is on the table. Either you prove it's a good resource of money or, vet it out either direction.
That's, yes.
That's what I want. I don't want anybody to, we can't talk about that. I want it to, oh, wow, we're lucky to have this and we're willing to pay that. And you understand what else is out there and you understand what value you're getting. It's easier than just to not talk about it and everybody just sweeps it under the rug and then it becomes this big expense that nobody talks about. So I hope we can just
Mayor Van.
bring it out there.
Fantastic and well put, and that's exactly my kind of, you can look at it from both sides of the coin, but you should be looking at it.
Exactly.
So-
Avoiding it doesn't get rid of it.
Right. So I, by the same token as I'm gonna put down here, police department review. And again, you're absolutely right, and that's part of the reason why that other document, the second document that went around, is that normally you have not seen that statistical information, and the meetings with the department heads should be focused on, and I look at it as, without putting in performance measurements, in the city, is how did you move the needle? In 2 years, you got $726,000. How did that equate to a better public safety for the residents of the city of North St. Paul? If you can't answer that question, then we got a little bit of trouble. And so that's really the drive that Brian and I are telling the department heads, that you need to be able to talk about how we're moving the needle. And that's part of,
It's very important because talking about it doesn't mean you're against something.
absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. I don't get me wrong.
Yep, 100%. That's why I'm agreeing. We'll bring it out, we prove good, bad, and then we work our way.
Exactly. Councilmember Juan.
Yeah, I was thinking about also perhaps looking at a review or cost benefit of
Contractors and consultants versus in-house.
Or vice versa, correct?
Sure, yeah.
That would contract him today, you may decide to go in-house, something that's in-house, you may. Have it backwards?
Outhouse? Sure.
Outhouse. Very good.
If I could
Oh, she's
also,
on a roll now.
Yep, that's good.
if I could also add perhaps looking at grants, whether it be federal, state, or otherwise.
Many grants that are given, and there was one that was passed by the legislation this past year, where there's public, not a grant, but public safety dollars. So the city's gonna be receiving $543,000 worth of funds that need to be used for public safety. Now, right away, you can look at it and say, all right, I got $542,000 to spend on whatever I want. The bottom line is, the city is already paying quite a bit in public safety components. I'm not talking about staffing, I'm talking about what's on the CIP. Replacement of vehicles, bulletproof vests. We got some big expenditures on the fire department coming up.
Yep.
That's where your $542,000 should really be, when we're looking at where we're at today, should be on things that are already existing in our CIP plan, to maybe help us be able to afford the things that are coming without putting all that burden on the taxpayers again. Instead of coming up with new ideas and new concepts. Every time you come up with a new concept, a new idea, whatever that useful life is, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years down the road, you gotta replace it. The money's not gonna be there. Now the city has that burden of replacing that to keep that part moving forward. Something to keep in mind, but yes, grants. We've already been looking at for the Emerald Ash Borer. They've increased money again for that, so we're going to be applying for
A little out of the box, just because I'm not familiar with it. Planned obsolescence of city vehicles, city equipment. I'm assuming there's some type of magical accounting that takes place to determine every 5 years, every 10 years. Is there a way to look at that? I mean, when we get rid of a vehicle, is it done? Or are we replacing it because we have budgeted to replace it, and I'm gonna hypothetically say 5 years?
That's a very good question. I think a lot of it is based upon the estimated useful life. You know, we saw a change when we saw, and I'm not picking on anybody, don't get, but we saw a change when it came into the desire of a different police chief. At one point in time, they had vehicles at a 7-year replacement, and his preference was 5 years. 5 years is acceptable in many organizations in the police force. But does it have to be? If you were to go back to that 7, do the calculation.
What does that do?
Yeah, exactly. And so, yes, we do have to have, you know, kind of a review of the useful lives.
Because 7 years for maybe a Ramsey County sheriff is much different than 7 years for North St. Paul 3x3 square miles.
Absolutely.
Does a balanced budget account for the cost of life expectancy? If this building's life expectancy is 30 years, and we are required to have a balanced budget, do we put a 30th of this building aside every year? How, and kind of back to the obsolescence of vehicles, if a vehicle is 7 years, do we put a 7th of each vehicle? What does a balanced budget mean in that?
That's a very good question. We're not quite there as far as putting funds aside to replace all of the vehicles. Definitely not the facilities. The facilities is probably the weakest area. But our equipment fund, where all the vehicles are being replaced from in the general fund, does have enough money to go all the way through for the next 10 years. It needs to be ratcheted up a little bit to accomplish exactly what you're saying. So in the budgets, so our equipment fund, our insurance fund, our technology fund, our building maintenance fund, and then we have a mechanic fund. But those 5 funds are internal service funds, so their costs are budgeted there, and then they're allocated out to the other departments. So if you look at any budget, you'll see that there could be, you know, there'll be an IT charge that's based on an allocation. Usually it's on FTEs for the sake of a better way to distribute it. Equipment is usually looking at it over a length of time, at least 10 years, and then having that allocation being in that budget, so they are contributing. And so then there's quarterly, basically payments that are made from those into that internal service fund. So they are included in the budgets themselves. So we're trying to get to the point where the true cost of that program is really reflected in one place. When you look at that budget, it has all of the costs. So, good question. Councilmember Wong.
Sales tax,
How could I forget that one?
right? It's so popular.
I want to bring up one, this is going to be a point of contention, but now that marijuana is becoming legal, that tax, that sales, I know it's tied to cities at times. It's sitting in my head, I can't.
Yeah, so my understanding is that cities will receive 20%
Yes.
of sales. However, local jurisdictions can't add additional taxes.
Can or cannot?
They cannot.
They cannot.
They cannot. It's set at 10%, and there's a lot of debate on why that is.
Okay, you opened it up.
I did, sorry.
No,
It's the reality of it.
No, I'm gonna go a step further.
Okay.
Well, what about the city being a cannabis distribution place to generate revenue? I know, controversial. I'm not gonna disagree with it. I'm not saying yes or no. I'm saying it's worth a conversation at some point in time.
I don't disagree.
You know, it was in the news quite a bit during the COVID timeframe. Cities that had gotten in when their population was less than 10,000 that opened up municipal liquor stores made a killing during the COVID time period. And they do a very good job outside of the COVID time period, but it's a revenue source. Again, look at those percentages that are sitting out there that were dependent on property taxes. It's a revenue source. So, in 2020, a lot of cities looking around and saying, kick themselves, why did we get into it? It was controversial back then. I'm not saying yes or no. Actually, I threw this out to our chief of police, and you know what he told me? He said, I'd support it. I could control it then.
I mean, I'd love to see a whole workshop on it, just,
Yeah.
because it's all new. It's new to,
It
it's, I'd love to have a workshop on it to talk through it, because it is a revenue source. And to your point, the percent of commercial versus percent of residential in the city of North St. Paul is way skewed heavier to the residents than to the commercial side, just based on where we are. And, you know, I've always been on board with what can we do to shift it off the residents and find someplace else to go. You know, I think we threw out last year parking meters, or you know, it's just some random ideas that were somewhat comical more than actual, but it's another source.
That was mine.
Then it was the greatest idea I ever heard.
That's how Minneapolis pays for it.
You know, and you did say that at the time you threw that out last year too. Greatest idea I've ever heard.
Way to go, Lisa.
You had mentioned municipals. Am I correct that because our population is over $10,000, that is off the table?
For a liquor store?
Yeah.
I have a correction. I think I said local jurisdictions cannot tax cannabis. They can if it's coupled with something else, but not
Part of the overall
standalone.
If it's part of your old sales tax generation, then, right?
That's my understanding, so.
There can't be a separate one just on,
Cannabis.
so it really covers underneath this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything in place for your departments? If the bill is a yearly $5,000, you must get a competing quote every 5 years. If the bill's every, you know, and I'm just throwing numbers, 50,000, you must get a quote every 2 years, scaling up quotes for costs.
So the purchasing policy itself states in there that, you know, everything, I think above $2,000, it's encouraged that you get 2 quotes, if possible. There's a part of the statute that basically says, one of your very first looks after you go up above $25,000, and the statute says you really should look at the Minnesota State contract list to see if there's a contract and purchasing power of master contracts. You need to first consider them, but you don't have to use them. Anything over $175,000 needs to have a formal bid process. So, yes, but doesn't mean, I look at this this one here a little bit differently, because we do have some big contracts. You know, some that come to mind are, we've got a law, we got 2 law contracts, one for here, that's over city council. We've got another one that's police. There's our engineering. There's our inspections. Those are some bigger dollar contracts that definitely could be looked at as
That's the hardest for a city our size, because every single city has to have the same thing, but when it's this size, it doesn't matter. It's like, oh, we only have 12,000, well, we gotta have the lawyers, we gotta have the law enforcement, we gotta have everything. Like when I build a phone system for somebody, say, well, how come it's not much difference, you know, from going from 25 to 50 users, because it's just adding a person. Same thing with this, we have to build this whole entire infrastructure for 12,000 that might go to 30,000 for the infrastructure we have to have. So that's where it becomes, you know, we're too small to be big and too big to be small, is how I refer to it as.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
But I think the point that Councilmember Nordby is saying is that, are we running some sort of competitive process from time to time to make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck?
Yes, and it's a great,
And that's, to me, the big
Yes.
walk away from that.
everything should be looked at for that type of thing, yeah, I agree.
All right,
Was there,
now we're gonna move on.
okay, we're moving on. One quick question, if you don't, is there anything on this list that the two members that were here for the last budget doesn't see on there that thinks, is there anything that jumps out at you?
I just went back, I tried to look through my notes from last year, and I didn't run parallel notes from with what we talked through last year.
Okay.
Did you see anything?
Parking.
Parking.
Yes.
Oh, Post-it notes.
Should we make that thousand? I fed you.
Yes, you did. You
I
earned
didn't need
it.
enough for a whole book of notepads.
No. So if you can take a moment and write down what you see as the city's highest priorities for the 2024 budget.
How specific or general are you looking?
I think we can drill down if it's too general.
You don't get to play? You choose, your opinion doesn't matter?
Are we almost ready to share? This is where I start to pick on people. Councilmember Cole,
Yes, sir.
what do you have?
I have roads, completion of the downtown improvement project, and ensure that we have adequate staffing.
May I have your? Thank you very much. Who would like to volunteer for being the second?
I liked it better when I sat down where Councilmember Norby is, I'm just saying.
It's a nice seat.
I can go next. It's not super long, but I have roads, and then I also have just the overall total compensation plan for employees.
Very good. I think mine's going down.
Yours is the first.
Brian's is right there with you.
We're stopping these, Brian.
Workshop's done now.
Yeah, it's all done. Give me that pizza back. Councilmember Wong?
Sure. The community center, start thinking about that, and staffing around that, or what that might look like. Parks and Rec, a master plan. I think that, our discussions this year warranted that. Instead of just roads, looking at like an entire transportation plan, including sidewalks. From my understanding at the retreat, that was a big topic. Including sidewalks and bike lanes. And then I said the internet, so Metro INET needs to be reviewed.
Okay. Very, very good. Councilmember Norby? There will be a summary of this that'll go out to everybody. Give me that.
I did more generalities than specifics. So I said keeping costs low, keeping perception of safety up, not kicking the can down the road, and limiting liability.
Okay, very good, thank you. Mayor?
Doing my last one.
Sure. It's nice to go last.
Exactly. I had the roads and the trails as well, the business layout to make sure we're, keeping our businesses, being able to work with them and to keep growing the way they're growing, and school safety and for the students.
Thank you very much. City manager?
We already discussed ours.
Would you like me to share his poster with you? It's pretty blank over
I'd
here.
like to hear about it.
Are you playing hangman over there?
Okay, please take a moment and write down what range you would like to set for the 2024 levy target.
Oh, that's not fair.
Big money. No whammies, no whammies.
What it needs to be? Or
And
you want
again,
it
just
to
as
be?
a reminder, we're at 5.6 just to break even.
Just to break even.
Okay.
$70,000 per percent.
What is that? 7,000 per?
70,000.
70 or 75? 70, okay.
Do some math.
You already done?
You can count me out on this one. I'm, not when it comes to this budget. I'm sorry, I'm a little, I'm still learning all this, so I'm gonna bow out of this one.
Nope, that's Christopher fine. Remember, phrase your answer in the form of a question.
Nobody can hate me right now, so.
All right, are we, all answers are in. Are there now final? And we're gonna go to the mayor.
I'd like to see it at 5%, see what we can do. I mean, we've gone through a lot over the last few years. I don't know how realistic. I'm done.
Right, that's why I threw the hands up there. Nope.
I said from 1 to 5%. I might be
What do you want to get rid of?
What?
I don't know. 6 to 10%.
You want more pizza? Would you like more pizza?
No,
I'll
thank you.
actually bring it. Just kidding.
Very nice.
Supposed to be an airplane.
I tried throwing a piece of paper at you, but I missed.
I went with 7 to 8. I used the base of 5.6% and then another $2 million added onto the budget for CIP for everything else to come up with a percentage.
Okay. It's a really interesting concept. Can I have yours too, please?
You can take Brian's.
He doesn't write anything. No, it's a really interesting concept because the city went away from special assessments a number of years back. And, obviously, special assessments generates revenue. And so now that's something that we have to levy. Is the city council open to having a portion of our levy on an annual basis to be dedicated towards infrastructure?
Is that special assessment you got one?
Yeah, instead of a special assessment, I mean, truthfully, to bring special assessments back is gonna create a lot of issues.
That was the last one to write the $10,000 check for my street
Yeah,
assessment.
that's right, you were in that last area.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah,
There is some
But-
truth to that, though.
but if you bring it back, many cities haven't, I mean, you can have.
I thought there was some unconstitutional, I thought something was passed where they weren't allowed to do special assessments anymore. Was
I
that?
just wrote a check out for $10,000 in my area.
Okay.
To have my road redone.
All right, then it's not true.
But, no, I mean, obviously, it's the methodology in which, how you're applying the special assessments to the property frontage. That is probably the biggest part of it that ends up being disputed. But you would end up having, major complaints if you run it back. But another way to offset it would be to have some sort of increase in your levy. And if you remember last year, that's what we were trying to do. And we had put some money, and then at the 11th hour, our health insurance went up significantly with PEEP, and it ate into our ability to start to build that constant. I look at it as being more of a sustainable way of funding your infrastructure into the future. And so it's just kind
Well-
of interesting.
How I looked at it, like one of the last ones to do the check for that is I don't have to pay $40,000 for a septic system. I don't have to pay, because I have all the city stuff that comes in front of my house that they're ripping up for. So to me, 10,000 compared to a septic system or something like that, in my mind, that's how I justified it, because I don't have to drill a well. I don't have to have a septic system out back that costs $30,000.
Sure.
But I understand how, nobody wants to add more to property tax, but yeah, I can see that.
So the last question for you tonight is if you could please take a moment and write down what budget topics or additional information would help in making your final budget decision. What other information would you like to see? Kind of told you how the format's gonna go. We're gonna have our department heads here. Next meeting, you'll be given the complete CIP booklet. And then when our department heads come, you'll see their budget. You'll see the narratives, the statistics. They'll be presenting both their budget and their CIP requests. And it's your opportunity to hear from them and to ask any questions that you may have. We'll be doing that with all of our budgets, all the way through the whole entire process. Again, up to September, we really do have to focus on general fund, HRA, EDA, because those are the levy components for the city to be able to certify our maximum. But is there other information that you seek to be able to help make that decision? And again, if you don't have something right now, you may come up with something later on. But it helps us make sure that we're keeping you as informed and giving you all the information that you need to make the best decision for the residents of the city of North St. Paul. And It helps us lay out how we're going to be doing the future presentations.
So you'll have a list, because we don't know what we don't know yet.
Right.
So we're brand new, so we need, you know, the guidance of
Yep.
other council members plus the city to say, you know, this is something we need to focus on if we don't know it, type of thing. Okay. All right.
One of the things I have is more Maplewood and Oakdale comparisons.
Okay.
Just what are our neighbors doing?
You bet.
They're fine lines.
And I really appreciate that budget you did with, for the, compare the other cities that you had down there for pricing, as far as, you know, where they're sitting and how other cities are doing it, our size too. I like Maplewood and Oakdale, but we're the little kids in the block. So exactly, we need to have somebody like Big Lake and those other ones. And I know a lot of times, I think when I talk to you, Jenny, you bring up Mounds View as quite a comparison sometimes
Yep,
when we
and they were-
talk.
Yep, and they
So-
were on our list.
And that would be something where, you know, how we can get, you know, compare notes with somebody that size and where they're going and what are they doing as far as police, fire, and just understanding what everybody's doing would be great. Yeah, Oakdale's not going up there.
Pick your kids. I'd love to see the department directors sit down and decide collaboratively what's the number one, their opinion of the number one priorities for the city and the city's needs, not individually.
That's good. I get a couple of comments. I'm striving for that. I think we did an excellent job last year when it came down to the end for additional asks as far as staffing is concerned. Had all the department heads together. Brian and I will be conducting an all-department head meeting, talking about the CIP and having them prioritize it. Everybody brings in a different perspective, but we've got to come out of there with what's the best interest of the city. I love it.
Well, they know the best of how things are, so it's good to be able to pull some of that information.
John, my Post-it note, I'll sign it.
Can I have it? Sign it, it's gonna be worth lots of money.
That's not worth anything.
Yeah.
Throw it away.
Two
No, not right now.
additional?
Yeah, so for me, I would like to see some impact reports or data on their operations, how things are going. And then particularly, like you had mentioned, how much is the needle moving, especially for those most recent requests or the previous year's requests.
I like it.
I'd also like to know what collaborations some of the different departments are doing, whether that's with another county or what have you. Just when we talk about resources and leveraging our resources, that might be helpful.
You should sign that.
Could I get your signature?
Hers is definitely worth something.
I'm feeling love on my side of the desk over here.
So, if there's no other questions, I want to thank you for a very good kickoff to the 2024 budget. Very insightful, a lot of ideas, a lot of food for thought for me, and how we develop and the information that we present to you in the future. Looking forward to working with all of you throughout this entire process. It's a fun ride. Councilmember Wong and Councilmember Cole know how fun this can be.
So much fun.
It's a lot of fun. And remember, I do bribe a little bit with the food up front. so-
Appreciate that.
But no, you're gonna be here for an hour and a half, you deserve it. We will end up, having some specials, some additional meetings, to be able to get through the budget. And doggone it, I'm losing everything. But we'll end up having some specials that we'll end up having. That's how we'll probably do the department heads. We'll split them up and then have it on a separate day. We'll have half of them come in one, and then the other half come in the other one, the other day. But we'll probably have to have a different time and maybe we start it at whatever works well for you, like at 5:30 and run it till we conclude those and keep moving forward.
I have a clarification question. So is that outside of the workshops that
I'm
are?
sorry, what?
Would that be outside of the regularly scheduled
Yes.
workshops? Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Many of your workshops are pretty well packed. And, I mean, I have no problem in going and talking until about 10, 11 o'clock at night if you'd like to do that. But I don't think you want to.
You don't scare me.
Shoot. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Nice
Thanks,
job.
Dan.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Mary Kate.
You helped me keep the toothpicks out of my eyes when we talk finances. I sincerely appreciate the way you do it.
All right.
Do we get to keep the Post-it notes?
Clean up on that one.
Came from
No.
city funds.
Oh, then you can have it back.
Are we good to call the meeting adjourned so we can adjourn the meeting? Anybody call for the?
So moved.
So moved, council member.
Second.
So,
Second.
council member Swears. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Run, woman, run.
We were already, I thought we were already done.